In a faraway village nestled deep within the snow-covered mountains, there lived a humble woman named Greta. Her little cottage stood at the edge of a forest, surrounded by ancient pine trees that whispered secrets to the wind. Greta was kind, hearted, and generous, but life had not been easy for her. She was a widow and spent her days mending clothes for the villagers and tending to her modest garden, though her means were meager. Greta's spirit was rich, and her tiny home was always warm with love. It was the eve of Christmas, and Greta, as she always did, prepared her home for the holiday. She hung a garland of holly across the mantel and placed a small bowl of sugared nuts on the table. She didn't have much, but she always found a way to make the season special. In the corner of her living room stood a scraggly little pine tree she had cut down from the forest. Its branches were uneven, and the needles had already begun to fall, but Greta had decorated it with the utmost care. She tied bright ribbons onto its branches and draped a strand of popcorn she had carefully strung herself. As the moon rose high in the sky, bathing the snow in a silver glow, Greta stood back to admire her handiwork. She sighed, a mixture of contentment and longing in her heart. "If only I could afford a real Christmas ornament," she whispered. "Just one shiny bauble to make this tree truly beautiful." What Greta didn't know was that her heartfelt wish had been overheard. High above the rafters of her cottage lived a tiny spider named Silken. Silken was no ordinary spider. She was a magical creature, born under the light of the Christmas star. For years, she had lived quietly in Greta's home, spinning her intricate webs in forgotten corners and watching the kind woman with admiration. Silken felt a pang of sadness as she listened to Greta's wistful words. The spider had seen how hard Greta worked and how much she gave to others despite having so little for herself. Silken decided then and there that she would do something extraordinary for Greta this Christmas. As Greta went to bed, pulling the heavy quilt up to her chin, Silken scurried down from her web in the corner of the room. She climbed onto the pine tree, her tiny legs moving quickly over the rough bark. The spider began to spin. With each thread of silk, Silken poured her heart into her work. Her web shimmered like moonlight, delicate and luminous. She spun and spun, covering every branch of the tree with her intricate designs. The hours passed, but Silken didn't stop. Her magic flowed through the threads, imbuing them with a glow that would only reveal itself when touched by the first rays of the Christmas morning sun. Outside, the village was still. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the air, and the stars twinkled like diamonds in the velvet sky. Inside the cottage, Silken worked tirelessly, weaving beauty into every corner of the little pine tree. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the frosted windows, Silken had finished her masterpiece. Exhausted but satisfied, the spider retreated to her hiding place in the rafters, eager to see Greta's reaction. As the sun rose higher, its golden rays reached the tree, and something magical happened. The webs began to sparkle and shine, their silken threads catching the light and turning it into 1,000 colors. The entire tree seemed to glow, each branch adorned with a web more beautiful than the finest ornaments. Greta woke to the soft light filling her room. She rubbed her eyes and sat up, her gaze falling on the tree. Her breath caught in her throat. "Oh my goodness!" she exclaimed, her hands flying to her mouth. She got out of bed and moved closer, her eyes wide with wonder. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. Her scraggly little pine tree had been transformed into a thing of unparalleled beauty. It glittered and gleamed as if it had been adorned with strands of silver and gold. Greta's heart swelled with joy, and tears filled her eyes. "This is a Christmas miracle," she whispered. Word of Greta's miraculous tree spread quickly through the village. Neighbors came to see the shimmering masterpiece, their faces lighting up with awe and delight. Greta welcomed them all, sharing her small bowl of sugared nuts and telling them about the magic of Christmas. Little they know, high above in the rafters, Silken watched it all with a satisfied smile. The spider had given Greta the most precious gift of all, the gift of wonder and joy. But this was only the beginning. For as beautiful as the tree was, its magic had yet to reveal its true purpose. As the sun climbed higher in the winter sky, Greta's home bustled with the laughter and chatter of neighbors marveling at the magical tree. Each visitor left with a heart warmed by the sight, spreading word of the miracle to even the farthest corners of the village. Greta, ever humble, simply smiled and welcomed the attention. In her heart, though, she couldn't help but wonder how such a transformation had occurred. By afternoon, the last of the visitors had departed, leaving Greta alone in her now quiet cottage. She gazed at the tree, its shimmering web like strands still catching the sunlight and casting rainbows across the walls. It feels as though this tree holds more than just beauty, she mused aloud. It feels alive with magic. High above, Silken listened to Greta's musings with a mix of pride and trepidation. The spider had poured all her magic into the tree, weaving not just beauty but a spell of protection and kindness. Silken knew that her work wasn't finished, for true magic often had a purpose beyond mere wonder. As dusk fell and the village settled into the serene quiet of Christmas night, a strange sound disrupted the peace. A loud knock echoed through Greta's door, sharp and urgent. Startled, she hurried to answer it, wrapping her shawl tightly around her shoulders to ward off the chill. When she opened the door, a man stood before her. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his cloak dusted with snow, and his face partially hidden by the shadows of the night. Behind him, a horse-drawn sled piled high with bags and crates waited in the road. "Good evening," the man said, his voice deep but gentle. "I'm sorry to bother you on Christmas night, but I've lost my way. The storm earlier covered the road signs, and I fear I won't find my destination before dark." Greta's kind nature immediately took over. Come in," she urged, stepping aside to let the man enter. "You must be freezing out there." The man hesitated, his gaze flicking to the tree behind her. His eyes widened slightly as he took in the sparkling webs. "Your tree, it's extraordinary," he murmured. Greta smiled, though her cheeks turned pink with embarrassment. "It's a bit of a Christmas miracle," she said. "Please, sit by the fire and warm yourself." The man nodded and stepped inside, his presence filling the small space. Greta quickly set about preparing a cup of hot tea, adding a dollop of honey from the small jar she kept for special occasions. As the man sipped the tea, he introduced himself. "My name is Lars," he said. "I'm a merchant traveling to the next town to deliver goods for the holiday market. I had hoped to arrive by now, but the snow has made travel near impossible." Greta nodded sympathetically. The storm was fierce, indeed. "You're welcome to stay here for the night. I may not have much, but I can offer a warm bed and a meal." Lars looked at her with gratitude. "You are very kind, madam. I'll gladly accept your hospitality." As Greta set about preparing a modest supper, Silken watched from the rafters. The spider's magical senses tingled. There was something unusual about this merchant, something that didn't quite align with his kind demeanor. Silken decided to keep a close eye on him. After the meal, Lars couldn't take his eyes off the shimmering tree. "I've traveled far and seen many wonders," he said, "but I've never encountered anything like this. How did you come by such a marvel?" Greta hesitated, unsure how to answer. I don't know," she admitted. "It was just a humble little tree yesterday. But this morning it looked like this. Perhaps it's a blessing from above." Lars nodded thoughtfully but didn't press further. Soon after, Greta showed him to the small guest room, where he thanked her again before retiring for the night. As the household grew quiet, Silken crept closer to the tree. The spider's magic sensed a disturbance, a ripple in the harmony of the home. Silken's glowing threads began to vibrate softly, a warning signal. Something about Lars wasn't right, and Silken resolved to uncover the truth. The night deepened, and all was still. Greta slept soundly in her room, dreaming of a warm Christmas morning. In the guest room, however, Lars was wide awake. He sat on the edge of the bed, his gaze fixed on the doorway. After a long moment he stood, moving quietly through the house. His steps were deliberate and silent as he approached the tree. By the faint light of the moon filtering through the window, the webs shimmered like silver and gold. Lars reached out a hand, his fingers brushing the strands. A faint hum of magic pulsed through the air, and Lars withdrew his hand, startled. Powerful, he whispered to himself. This tree holds more than beauty. It holds magic, real magic. Silken, perched on a branch, watched intently. Her small heart raced as she realized Lars's true intent. The merchant wasn't simply admiring the tree, he was trying to unravel its secrets. Lars reached into his cloak and pulled out a small knife. If I can take just a piece, he murmured, I can sell it for more gold than I've ever dreamed of. This could change my life. Silken didn't wait another second. The moment Lars's blade touched the web, the spider sprang into action. She scurried down the branch and onto Lars's hand, her tiny legs moving with purpose. Lars yelped in surprise as he felt the spider's presence. He flung his hand, trying to shake her off, but Silken held fast. With a sudden burst of magic, she sent a shock of energy through his hand, causing him to drop the knife. The noise woke Greta, who hurried out of her room, her heart pounding. What's happening? She cried, her eyes darting between Lars and the glowing tree. Lars stepped back, his face pale. I'm sorry, he stammered. I was tempted by the beauty of the tree. I didn't mean any harm. Greta's kind eyes filled with sadness. Magic like this is not meant to be taken, she said softly. It's a gift, not a prize. Lars hung his head, shame washing over him. You're right, he said. I let my greed get the better of me. Please forgive me. A Silken watched from the shadows, her tiny heart easing as she sensed the sincerity in Lars's voice. The spider's magic had done its job, revealing the man's greed but also giving him a chance to repent. Greta, ever forgiving, nodded. We all make mistakes, she said. Let this be a lesson for both of us. Christmas is a time for giving, not taking. The morning sun broke over the snow-covered village, painting the rooftops with a soft golden glow. Greta rose early, her heart still heavy from the events of the night. She glanced at the shimmering tree in the corner of her home, its delicate web, like strands glowing faintly in the morning light. Despite everything, the tree seemed untouched, its magic as vibrant as ever. Greta made her way to the kitchen, where Lars was already awake and sitting by the fire. His cloak was folded neatly over the chair, and his face bore an expression of quiet remorse. He stood as soon as he saw her, bowing his head. Good morning, Lars said softly. I owe you my deepest apologies for my actions last night. I have no excuse for my greed, but I promise you, I've learned my lesson. Greta studied him for a moment. There was no trace of deceit in his eyes, only genuine regret. She nodded slowly. Good morning, Lars. I believe you when you say you're sorry, but trust is not so easily mended. Actions speak louder than words. Lars straightened, determination flickering in his eyes. Then let me prove myself to you. Tell me how I can make amends. Greta thought for a moment before gesturing to the tree. This tree is more than just a decoration. It's a symbol of hope and kindness for the entire village. If you truly wish to make amends, help me share its magic with others. Lars hesitated, his gaze flicking to the tree. Share its magic? But how? Greta smiled faintly. Not by taking from it. The magic lies not in the webs, but in the joy and wonder it brings. Let's use it to bring happiness to those who need it most this Christmas. Lars nodded, a sense of purpose filling him. I'll do whatever I can to help. Silken, still hidden in the shadows, listened to their conversation with approval. The spider had spent the night weaving more than webs. She had spun a plan. With her tiny legs, she descended from the tree and landed softly on Greta's shoulder. Greta smiled as she felt Silken's presence. Ah, there you are, little one. I had a feeling you were watching over us last night. Lars stared at the spider in awe. This tiny creature, it's the source of the magic, isn't it? Greta nodded. Yes. Silken has been with me for years, but I never realized just how special she was until now. Silken's 8 eyes glimmered as she skittered onto Greta's hand. Using her magic, she projected a faint glow that seemed to outline an idea in the air, an image of the tree surrounded by villagers, their faces alight with joy. Greta's smile widened. She's showing us the way. We'll host a gathering here tonight and invite everyone in the village. We'll share the warmth and magic of Christmas together. Lars quickly agreed, and the two set to work. Greta began preparing her modest home for the gathering, tidying up and arranging extra chairs borrowed from neighbors. Lars, eager to prove his sincerity, offered to gather supplies and spread the word about the event. By midday, the entire village buzzed with excitement. News of Greta's magical tree had already spread far and wide, but the invitation to witness its wonder firsthand sparked even greater anticipation. People began preparing food, drinks, and small gifts to bring, eager to contribute to the celebration. Meanwhile, Lars made his way to the market in the neighboring town, determined to do more than just deliver the goods he carried in his sled. As he bartered and traded, he also purchased small trinkets and toys for the children of the village, using what little savings he had left. Back at Greta's cottage, Silken worked her own magic. The spider spun new webs around the tree, each strand shimmering with an otherworldly light. She wove patterns of stars, snowflakes, and bells, transforming the humble fur into a masterpiece that seemed to pulse with Christmas spirit. As dusk fell, the first guests began to arrive, their arms laden with dishes and gifts. Greta greeted each one with a warm smile, ushering them inside to marvel at the tree. Gasps of awe filled the room as the villagers took in the sight, their faces glowing with wonder. Children gathered around the tree, their laughter ringing out as they tried to count the stars in Silken's web. Adults whispered to one another about the miracle, their hearts lifted by the beauty and magic of the moment. Lars returned just as the gathering was in full swing, his sled now piled high with gifts and supplies. He worked tirelessly, helping Greta serve food and ensuring every guest felt welcome. Despite his earlier misstep, the villagers quickly warmed to him, sensing his genuine desire to make things right. As the evening wore on, Greta stood before the crowd, her voice strong and clear. Tonight we celebrate more than just Christmas. We celebrate kindness, forgiveness, and the magic of togetherness. This tree is a reminder that even the smallest acts of love can create something truly extraordinary. The villagers erupted into cheers, their spirits lifted by Greta's words. Silken, perched on the highest branch of the tree, felt a surge of pride. Her magic had brought joy to the village, but it was the people's love and unity that truly made the night special. Later, as the celebration wound down and the guests began to leave, each one took a piece of the magic with them. A memory of the tree, a sense of wonder, and a renewed belief in the power of Christmas. Lars approached Greta as the last of the villagers departed. "Thank you," he said earnestly, "for giving me the chance to make amends. I'll never forget what I've learned here." Greta smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. "And thank you, Lars, for proving that even the most flawed among us can find redemption." As the cottage grew quiet once more, Greta turned to the tree, her heart full. "Thank you, Silken," she said softly, "for reminding us of the true magic of Christmas." Silken clicked her tiny mandibles in response, her glowing webs shimmering one last time before the lights dimmed. That night, as snow fell gently over the village, Greta drifted off to sleep with a smile on her face. The tree stood as a beacon of hope, its magic spreading far beyond the walls of her home, touching the hearts of all who had witnessed its beauty. And so, the legend of the Christmas spider was born, a tale of love, forgiveness, and the extraordinary power of even the smallest miracles.